YouTube is really hard. It takes over 400 videos to get to 10,000 subscribers.
I think creators like Alex Hormozi, Abdaal, Ryan Deiss, people see them and it's a bit of a black box, but there's a massive team behind that.
I think the fundamental difference is those entrepreneurs are willing to do what it takes to do well on YouTube. They're not creating videos for fun.
Most viewers don't realize that there's 10, 15, 20 full-time working behind the scenes behind these channels.
The thread that runs through each of these individuals is entrepreneurship, and it's no accident. A lot of talking head educational videos look and feel the same now, and everybody copies everyone else's ideas.
What's the biggest disagreement you've had with Ali Abdaal?
Everyone's got a different perspective on what works and why. I have disagreed with Ali creatively on a number of things. The biggest disagreement in recent memory is
3, 2, 1.
Saf, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're the YouTube manager behind names like Ali Abdaal, Ryan Deiss, and Daniel Priestley. What do these ultra successful entrepreneurs do differently that others don't?
Ooh. YouTube is really hard. I think on average it takes, according to Jamie Rawsthorne, who did an analysis on this, over 400 videos to get to 10,000 subscribers. And so these entrepreneurs are beginning to realize that organic content is a way to reach their ideal customers because it's becoming increasingly hard to do it through paid ads. But they've built systems, hired teams, found the best talent to be able to do YouTube seriously. And it's not just these entrepreneurs that are doing it. It's also big media companies. And you see the examples of Red Bull who are doing the same things. So the way we understand YouTube is usually as the individual creator. But going forwards, I think we'll increasingly see a lot of funding coming into the space.
So in terms of these entrepreneurs taking YouTube seriously, what does that look like? If you compare someone who sees YouTube as a casual kind of game, maybe the average person who thinks YouTube is something you do on your iPhone in your bedroom, versus Daniel Priestley, Ryan Deiss, Ali Abdaal.
Yeah, so I very carefully choose who I work with to make sure that they have the potential to be able to blow up on YouTube. Quite often it means choosing people who are key people of influence. And that means that they're a thought leader in a given space already. They already know how to show up online and have a point of view. So for a lot of these people, they have the knowledge, they have the insights, and they have a message they want to share with the world, but they don't necessarily know how to do that through YouTube. And so I help them to translate their message into the format of YouTube, and I help to make it like as simple and easy as possible for them. So it looks like posting once a week consistently. It looks like taking a lot of time to work on your packaging, which is your titles and thumbnails. And it also looks like taking a lot of time on the hook, which is the first 15 to 30 seconds, making sure it delivers on the value proposition. And then afterwards, I tend to give these entrepreneurs more free reign around the video and what they'd like to share. But quite often when you have a finger on the pulse and you're already consuming entrepreneurial content, you're on YouTube and seeing all of the different influencers that are in the area and in the space, you can point them and guide them in the right direction so that they can still share their message, but in a way that's going to resonate with their audience the best.
I think creators and big name entrepreneurs like Alex Hormozi, Ali Abdaal, Ryan Deiss, people see them and it's a bit of a black box because sure, on YouTube, it just seems like Alex Hormozi sitting there in his nice room with a black background and just chatting. But both you and I know there's a massive team behind that. And there's so much more strategy than anybody could possibly even imagined. So could you pull back the curtain a bit, right? What is different in these entrepreneurs' mindsets and beliefs and philosophy in the way they treat content that people don't realize?
Good question. Okay, this is a good question. So I think the fundamental difference is those entrepreneurs are willing to do what it takes to do well on YouTube. They're not creating videos for fun. They're creating videos with an end goal in mind. One is very maybe selfish and self-motivated because it's for the business. But the other is actually to be able to share a message and to be able to educate people at scale on what they're trying to do. And the best way to do that is by looking at where do they have content audience fit and being able to find the right message for the right people at the right time. But because they treat it so seriously, people like Alex Hormozi and some of these top business leaders, they hire the best agencies and the best talent to come in and teach them everything they need to know about doing YouTube. And either they bring it in-house or they continue working with those agencies over the long term so that they can continue to execute at the very highest level. Those people don't have a lot of time. They're incredibly busy, incredibly efficient executives. And so to help them to do content at scale, they need to get help. And so for a lot of solo creators, the biggest challenge for them is trying to do everything by themselves. They've got to do the filming, the editing, the scripting. They've got to practice in front of camera. They've got to think about what message they want to share. They've got to think about thumbnail design. There's an infinite list of things that you could possibly do. But the best of the best hire the best people in each department to help them to execute. And you don't see that because often you see the face, but you don't see that behind the scenes, there's an entire team powering it. So, I feel very fortunate. It's a small world. And in my network, I hear about the talent behind Alex Hormozi's team or people like Chris Williamson. And there's like different channel managers that are working on all of their different projects. And it's very interesting to hear the different experiments they're running, the different sort of operational structures, the different content cadences, what's working right now. Like Dan Martell, for instance, is using the community tab on YouTube and doing some amazing things. And at Team Ali Abdaal, we're taking notes like, how can we use the community tab to help us as well? Like, what are they doing right? And so we can reach out to their team and like learn from them. And it's very much, it's never a solo one-man show, even if that's what you see behind the camera.
Most viewers don't realize that there's 10, 15, 20 highly successful, highly intelligent people full-time working behind the scenes behind these channels. When Alex Hormozi's in his private jet just sitting there chatting to the camera, that is not just him whipping out his phone and just talking. He's not in Canva and Photoshop creating that thumbnail. He's not doing anything there. He's the talent and there's a whole team behind him. So you are behind the curtain here. So what are some of those major roles, probably 3 to 5 roles that exist behind the camera that people don't actually know about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the biggest role and probably the most obvious one is the video editor. And so this is the person that's going to help you to create a polished video from raw footage. But quite often, the video editor might not be very talented at motion graphics. So you might have a motion graphic designer who helps you to pull together the graphics. By the way, this is all in the context of a talking head educational video. And there's so many different types of videos out there, but that's the one that I can speak to the most. But more often than not, both of those people need to translate the founder's insights into what that finished vision is. And that's where a YouTube channel manager or a YouTube strategist comes into play. So that would be the third person. This is in no particular order, by the way. The YouTube strategist is working with that person behind the scenes, the founder, on what are the best ideas that we can work on with the biggest value proposition, where we have a title, thumbnail, and a hook that we think is absolutely going to fly. And what are some like A/B tests that we could run afterwards, just in case we've got it wrong? What are we reading from the audience? What are we picking up from other channels in our niche that are doing well? What are outlier videos that are working right now? So those 3 would be like the first 3 that come to mind. The next hire would also be a thumbnail designer. A thumbnail designer is so important on YouTube. And there are lots of AI tools that can help you to put together a compelling thumbnail now, which is great. But for a long time, a thumbnail designer was someone who'd spent a lot of time in Photoshop trying to pull everything together. I still think there's a role for it right now, but that might be changing in the future. A script writer is also really helpful to have on the team. Now with script writing, it can go both ways because you can like completely teleprompt a script, or you can get talking points and have the key person of influence talk through them. But where a script writer, the 80-20 of the script writer's job is to like really craft a really good hook to go at the beginning of the video. And so often that requires feedback rounds with the person in front of camera. They want to talk in their tone of voice. They're the expert at the end of the day, so it's really hard to ghostwrite for them. So it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship. I think that's it. I think those 4 are probably the main 4. Like there are all sorts of other job titles you can have for people who help you to repurpose social media content, who help you do shorts and things like that. But yeah, you could have 4 full-time people helping you running a YouTube empire as the MVP, and then it scales up from there. If you decide to do 2 videos a week or 3 videos a week, then you can imagine like how much extra talent you need to hire.
You mentioned how you're incredibly selective with who you work with. So tell me, what about Ali Abdaal, Daniel Priestley, and Ryan Deiss stood out? And could you give me a background on each of those individuals?
Yeah, so the thread that runs through each of these individuals is entrepreneurship, and it's no accident. It was also not crafted either. I've wanted to be an entrepreneur ever since I was 10 years old. And when I landed my dream job working as a video editor for Ali Abdaal about 2.5 years ago, I learned so much about the space and about the industry, and I was introduced to all sorts of interesting people. One of them is Ryan Deiss. He runs a portfolio of 17 companies that cash flows $200 million a year. He's based out in Austin, Texas. And he runs a program called the Scalable Program, which helps entrepreneurs scale to $10 million. He's increasingly realized like the power of YouTube, and he wants to lean into it a lot more. And so he asked for my help with that. And so I've been delighted to help him because there's so much that I've learned from him. And then very recently, I've also chosen to work with Daniel Priestley. I've said no to like so many people over the last like 6 months because I only want to say yes to people I know I can truly help, and I'm very excited to help. And Daniel has appeared on so many podcasts and he's had millions and millions of views but his YouTube channel doesn't reflect that. It doesn't reflect the caliber of entrepreneur that he is. And I feel like I'm best placed with my experience and my interest to be able to help him get to that next level.
Some people might say the fact that you have these connections are unfair or you got quote unquote lucky. So I want to hear from your perspective. How can someone craft a network like that? Because from month 5, 6, 7, in year 1 of your agency, you're already able to sit with titans of the industry like Daniel Priestley and Ryan Deiss and Ali Abdaal. So tell me, how did you actually craft these connections and make it work?
It's not an accident that it's happened the way it's happened. There's been a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes. When I graduated uni, I thought I wanted to go into startups, and I had nothing to do with the space. I'd always had an interest in YouTube. I did it for fun ever since I was 10 years old, but I never thought I could make a career out of it. It was only when I got my job working with the Ali Abdaal team as a video editor that things started to change. But it was almost like the perfect storm because I found that I was the right person in the right place at the right time. I was only a video editor for about 2 or 3 months before I pitched to Ali, can I take on more responsibility? And it ended up being the creative director, head of post-production for about 6 months. And then after that, I was like, I want even more responsibility. Can I be a head of sales and marketing? Because I have previous experience doing that at a startup. And let's like launch a CRM in HubSpot. And like, how do we connect the organic content to the CRM and have it like talk to each other and give us insights? But during that time, like I've always wanted to put myself in the right rooms, to ask the right questions, to hang out with people that I'm naturally drawn to and interested in. I think it's really hard to like do that in an inauthentic way. And so to be able to be in the position now where I feel very fortunate to have lots of referrals and a network in the YouTube industry with titans that I would have once dreamed of, I still pinch myself to this day, but it certainly wasn't an accident. And I spend a lot of my time in WhatsApp, networking, catching up, hosting dinners, hosting events, because that's the thing that really brings me alive. Often with these entrepreneurs, I'm more alive than I am with like some of my friends from home. I don't know if I should include that, but but like I love being in those rooms. It's like one of my favorite places to be.
I don't think luck really exists in situations like this. Sure, fine. If you roll a dice and you get a 6, okay, fine, that's luck. But I think someone like you rolls the dice a lot more than the average person. And even last night, after I've kind of entered your sphere, entered this world of entrepreneurship over the past few years, we had a dinner with Ali Abdaal and Nisha Shah and a few other creators. Stay, your friend who works with creators like Eric and Yes Theory and Colin and Samir, right? So you start to just be in the room with people of this caliber and level once you enter this world. But it's not by accident. It's by intentionally putting yourself out there, creating events for this serendipity to occur. Like, for example, we're in London right now. The reason I flew here was to take part in the Ali Abdaal Mastermind. And because I took part in that and I'm friends with you, I was able to meet all these other people. So it's almost like network compounds like that, where you take one step in one direction and then you take another step and another step and another step, and you meet more and more and more people. So I don't think any of that is really luck. So how can people, the listeners, create more luck and serendipity in their life so they can meet interesting and incredibly successful people like you have?
The role of luck in my case, it probably plays the fact that I was born in London. I live in London, and London is a big hub in the creator economy. We're seeing like London, LA, New York, and Austin. It's like one of the big hubs. So being in London definitely really helps, but you can definitely take agency in creating your own luck. The way I've been able to do that, one of the ways, is by taking flights to different places to meet different people. And someone said to me, I believe it was Cliff Weitzman on a podcast actually mentioned this, treating the airport terminal like a bus stop. And it doesn't have to have all the baggage of being like this massive thing. You can go and take a flight and go to a different country. You can crash at a friend's place just to go to an event where you get to hang out with people who you'd really love to hang out with and you love to connect with, and you just don't know what's going to happen on the other side. And I remember having this very pivotal moment where my friend Shervin invited me to New York, and he invited me for 4 or 5 days. And I literally had no idea what I'd do in that time. There wasn't like a very clear agenda or like an event or a reason to come. But he was like, look, I'm free. Do you want to come over? I was like, yeah, go on then. And literally the day before, I had booked the flight. I'd packed my bags. I went to New York. I crashed at the Content Closet. And during those 4 or 5 days, every single day, there was something awesome happening. We were invited to a Spotify event on one day. We went to play paddle with Aman from Yes Theory. And the head of PR at ATP World Tennis, who then invited us to the quarterfinals at the US Open afterwards. And it was like such a sick experience. I missed my return flight home intentionally so I could stay to go to that tennis game and then get the flight back on the next day. I have absolutely no regrets. It was like the best 5 days I'd had in a really long time. So definitely taking flights and traveling to places like you've done to come for the mastermind. The other thing is like something I've learned from Tejas, who's also in New York, is you can also take the initiative to host events and host dinners and bring people together. A lot of people are afraid to make that first step and be the one to actually host the event and ask people if they'd like to hang out. But everyone, like, I think deep down, everybody really does want to connect, but there are so few people who are willing to take that first step to go and do it. So I decided to host lots of dinners, lots of socials around things that I really enjoy. So like running in coffee or playing paddle. Sports is a big thing for me. And I find other creators who want to be able to do that as well. And slowly and surely, one creator finds out, another creator finds out, is there someone cool that you'd like to bring along? And you just create your own circle. And so I'm starting to feel the London hub growing. But yeah, even when I had a full-time job, that was what I was doing. And even as an entrepreneur now, that's also what I continue to do.
The kind of person who takes the effort to actually organize things, people are incredibly grateful to that person too. I've been organizing a few events here and there over the past weeks and months, and I've noticed that people are so busy in their own life. Everybody has things going on, but when they receive an invite, they're all like so grateful and many times actually do show up. So if you can be the guy to actually put in the effort, take that brain space and connect people, then your network exponentially grows. So I completely agree. I think being the host and also taking the flight when you get an opportunity, even if it feels inconvenient and effortful, that's how you actually build those connections.
100%. Yeah. It's also something that can be learned, and I've never always been that way, but I definitely started to pick it up more when I was working on the Ali Abdaal team. Just from being around Ali, his bias to action is very quick, and quite often everything has a lightness and ease to it. And so a lot of these social situations or functions that you try and organize or taking a flight, there are so many examples of these things which can feel heavy, but you can choose to make them feel light, and you can choose the path of least resistance. You can choose like, what's the easiest way to do this? And so getting into the habit of doing that quite regularly made it a lot easier to be able to continue to do this stuff into the future.
Speaking of working for Ali Abdaal, what was it like working for him? Was he your boss, friend, or something else?
Oh, yeah. He started off as a boss and he finished as a friend. It was the most incredible 2 years I've had in my 20s so far. I mean, the first year of entrepreneurship is pretty damn good as well, but it was the most incredible 2 years. I joined the team as a video editor, but prior to that moment, I had been consuming Ali's content on YouTube, and the first video I saw was his how to study with an iPad Pro, and I invested in an iPad Pro after seeing that video. And I remember suddenly feeling really excited to go to uni and be able to study with like a piece of tech. And I ended up getting some really good grades at the end of it. And I can't like attribute that all to an iPad, but definitely like enjoying the process and being more invested in learning how to learn. Over time, I started to become interested in topics of entrepreneurship and technology and investing. And then when I was working in startups, I saw he was advertising for an in-person full-time role. And it was never on my radar to even go for a role like that. But I knew when he was advertising for it, he's the only person I wanted to work for other than myself, just to be in the room and just be able to learn from him directly. So when I did get the job as a video editor, I spent like 2 or 3 days a week learning from him and his team. People would pay like hundreds of dollars for just an hour of their time. And just imagine being in the same room where you're learning by osmosis from all of these people, getting their perspectives on different things that are happening, being able to share your personal experiences and getting their opinions and thoughts on whatever you're working on. So there is a lot that you learn just from being in the room. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, is like the bias to action and things being very quick. Ali seems to like operate at the highest level, and he's able to do it very consistently. And a lot of that is a natural ability, but a lot of that is like habits. And being able to get an inside look into that and being able to adopt some of those practices and routines and bring it into your own life and like direct it at a goal that you really want has been super helpful. But yeah, also working on the YouTube channel has like been so much fun. I remember like the first week I came in, we did I was actually told on the first day I got sat down by Angus and he said, Saf, welcome to the team. I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. I was like, right, it's my first day. He goes, right, so the bad news is our head video editor has just resigned. I was like, right. The good news is you're now our head video editor. I was like, oh, cool. The next video is coming out in like 6 days. You need to get it ready. The crazy thing is I hadn't been a video editor for anybody else up until this point. I don't have a portfolio of being a video editor. I pitched them on a trial task that I spent a lot of time on, and then I built a personal website and sent it to their team. And so when they reviewed the personal website and why they should hire me with the trial task, which had like the perfect aesthetic, the right cuts, the good narrative, all of the things that I've come to admire about that channel, but also just having good personal taste, they knew immediately they wanted to work with me. But coming in on the first day and being told like, oh yeah, your video is about to be viewed by like 1 million plus people, you better get it ready. I was like, all right, this is it. So I spent 6 days working on the video, editing the video. There were a couple of issues. I noticed we didn't have a very good overhead camera. So I had to set up the overhead camera in the studio. And when you look at that video, you'll notice like the hands that are drawing it out are my hands, because I wanted to be able to visualize it and bring it to life in a different way. And so that was like incredibly meaningful to be able to like create a piece of work and suddenly have that impact and see it straight away. So yeah, that was it. That was the story of how I got started over there.
If somebody's interested in entrepreneurship, do you recommend they start by going and doing their own thing, or they start by working for another entrepreneur?
I would say start by working for another entrepreneur. I've learned so much from surrounding myself by other entrepreneurs. And I'm still surrounding myself by entrepreneurs and learning all of the time. It is sometimes easy to fall into the trap of like learning to make an impact later and never taking the leap. I almost fell into that trap. And it was only when I was 26 years old, I realized I knew one of my goals was to start a business before 30. And so I had to quit and like make it work and make it happen. And that was a forcing function for me to get it over the line.
You once recorded a podcast with Ali on Deep Dive. What was that like and why didn't you release it?
Yeah, so we recorded a podcast together. It actually wasn't necessarily meant to be a deep dive episode. It was potentially going to be a main channel episode where we'd chop it up and include it. The idea was like, we recorded the podcast on the day I left my job. And the idea was like, okay, let's record this podcast here and a podcast 1 year later. And let's like bridge the gap. Like what actually happened? What was like the insights sort of between now and then? We haven't recorded the follow-up episode and we actually had one camera angle fail. So this video probably never come out. But yeah, it was a very like emotional day, like leaving that job and then like, yeah, figuring out next steps.
Famously, there are 4+ YouTube videos of Ali Abdaal's employees leaving, including one of yours and our friend Tintin's. Why does everybody leave the Ali Abdaal team?
I think it gets a lot of press and attention. People leave a lot of YouTube teams all the time. I think there's the Vox videos that tend to go quite viral as well. After about 2 years, I think people want the next challenge. And at Ali Abdaal's team, since it's a very flat structure and people can't necessarily get promoted to the next level, they tend to look towards other places to be able to do that. But because they're all quite entrepreneurial to begin with, because that's usually a filter for bringing people in, they often start their own businesses. And so one of the ways to kickstart their own businesses is by using the credibility of having done it for Ali Abdaal. So they'll make a YouTube video about it or a LinkedIn post, and then they'll use that to help them sort of work with other creators and build their own personal brands. But there isn't a sinister reason behind it. I think it's just content, first and foremost, but also when you have very entrepreneurial people who come into a team, they're young, they're ambitious, and they're ready for the next level, they're inevitably going to leave at some point.
Do you think it's a good or a bad thing that many of Ali Abdaal's employees are incredibly entrepreneurial? Because as a manager, as a CEO, as a entrepreneur myself, I don't know how it would feel if a bunch of my employees just kept quitting all the time to go do their own thing. And while I support entrepreneurship as a general idea, and I think everybody should fulfill their own dreams, it would actually negatively affect the business if my employees were constantly leaving to go do their own thing, especially if they're in the same space, almost competing with Ali and his products and stuff like that. So what do you think about that in terms of being a founder yourself and having your employees leave?
Yeah, for my first hire, I hired someone who was very entrepreneurial. I believe at like the start of the journey, when you're going from 0 to 1 and you don't have enough cash flow, it makes sense to hire someone who's entrepreneurial, who's hungry, who can be a generalist. But once you get to a certain level, then it makes sense to hire people who are a lot more specialists in certain areas, and they're more replaceable within a wider system because it's a system that doesn't rely on a key person. So yeah, in the case of, I think it's definitely like a journey. Like I think you start with entrepreneurial people and then maybe you'd graduate to more generalists and specialists and CEOs and CMOs. In the case with Ali and his team, I think a very beautiful thing happened which people don't probably realize on the surface, which is that Ali enjoys very good relationships with all the people who leave the team afterwards. And quite often they come back to help out. In my case, I was asked to come back to help out with the channel after leaving, 4 months later. And Ali is very keen to like do long-term games with long-term people. And I think entrepreneurs connect with other entrepreneurs. They want to see each other succeed. They want to help each other out. And yeah, that's also like a hidden benefit, which you probably don't get to see.
Do you feel like every person who leaves Ali Abdaal's team maintains the same level of relationship? And I'm only saying this because I feel like you guys are genuinely great friends at this point. And it's rare to have an employee leave a team and end up being really good friends with the CEO and founder, right? It's incredibly rare for that line to be blurred like that. So does that happen with everyone, and why do you think it happened with you?
Yeah, it doesn't happen with everyone. And to be objective about it, like not everyone finishes their time on that team or any team in the same way. Some people might have been let go. Some people might have chosen to leave because they wanted the next shiny thing. Some people might have left because they wanted to start their own business. There's all sorts of reasons why people leave. And that means they have all sorts of relationships with their previous employer. To put it into perspective, I've taken so many risks and changed my career path so many times and left so many jobs. At most of those junctures, I haven't really continued my relationships with the people in the space from the previous role organization. But with YouTube, because it's the thing I'm so passionate about, it's the thing that I watch as soon as I wake up, it's the thing I watch on my lunch break, it's what I do for a living, and I check YouTube Studio before I go to sleep. I find my work is play and it's fun. And so there's a lot of people, including Ali, but also people on the team that I continue to hang out with, I continue to co-work with and enjoy a really good relationship with. But I don't think that's the case for everyone. I think in my case, that's just what I love, but I can't speak on behalf of everyone else. They'll have different relationships with different employees for different reasons.
All right, quick break. If you're trying to leave the 9-to-5 and build a business, this book has to be on your desk. $100 Million Money Models by Alex Hormozi. The whole $100 million series genuinely changed the game for me. It helped me nail offer structure, pricing and packaging, and how to pick models that actually scale, not just sound good on paper. I credit this series to helping me build $1 million business in my 20s after leaving my corporate job. Now here's the fun part. I bought 200 copies to give away to listeners who want to start or level up their business. Here's how to get yours. You need to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. In honest review, you can say whatever you want, screenshot it, and just email the screenshot to reviews@manazir.org. We'll then send you a link to claim a free copy. We cover the cost of the book, you just cover shipping. That's it. If you want the ultimate resource to get serious about your offer and revenue model, this is it. So just leave a review, screenshot it, and email us. There are only 200 copies available, so do this as fast as possible. All right, back to the episode. Have you ever disagreed with Ali creatively? And who was right?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. Definitely. Everyone's got a different perspective on what works and why. I have disagreed with Ali creatively on a number of things. And we recently made a video, which is called Getting Rich is a Game. And the thumbnail for this video was like an 8-bit version of Ali. And that was like a big departure from the usual style on the channel. And there are like different people, team members internally that might have approached that thumbnail very differently. Ali might have approached that very differently to begin with. And I think one of the concerns was that this thumbnail looks very pixelated or looks very like blurry and like out of focus. My suggestion, as I think most people's like approach should be, is to like A/B test the thumbnail or at least look at the data and be led by the data. So in situations where we have a creative disagreement, my hunch is always, let's lead with the idea which I think is best. If you're hiring me as the expert, as a strategist to come in, and then let's look at the data after 12 hours or 24 hours. And if it's not performing, then we can totally change it. But having worked with Ali and Ryan and Daniel, and I do unpaid work for lots of other big creators that you'll recognize, I have access, my YouTube studio is like a list of all sorts of like really interesting people. I was like, okay, look, I've been in the data. This is what's interesting. This is what's working. These are the hooks that really works in these outlier videos. Can we please try this? And if it doesn't work, I promise we can change it, but let's give it a go. And then we start to see some interesting results.
What's the biggest disagreement you've had with Ali Abdaal?
Good question. Quite often, there is a tension between what the influencer wants to do and what the business needs. And they can sometimes be two very different things. And that might look like we need to film sponsors, there are sponsor deadlines. And then in the case of the influencer, it's, I really want to film a low lift video, like an honest reflection type video. And so maybe the biggest disagreement in recent memory is the channel strategy for a mature channel like Ali's, which has over 6 million subscribers. He's been around for a really long time. How do we keep innovating and being like the cutting edge of the space, especially as newer, smaller channels are working like way harder and going to a way higher standard. And we can't just rely on like Ali's charisma to be able to drive the channel to the next level. So we've had some creative disagreements around like, what video ideas do we make? How heavy lift are they? How much input do we need? How clickbaity do we want to be or not? And so sometimes we'll have very differing opinions. And I feel very strongly about one opinion. Look, let's just test it. But ultimately, the buck ends with him, and it's his YouTube channel. And so he might want to take it in like a different direction. And so if he makes that decision, we just make the best of what we have available to us.
Let's go back to your childhood. You have a crazy story about your dad, entrepreneurship, and how you first got into business. Let's hear it.
So, yeah, my first foray into entrepreneurship was when I was about 11 years old. I had an Xbox, like the original Xbox Crystal. And the fan on this Xbox was so loud, it used to drive my mum insane. She would like open the door and be like, just shut the Xbox up. It was like so noisy. And my dad, he was always entrepreneurial. And he came up with an idea one morning. And he said, why don't you sell your Xbox and then use that money as seed capital to go and buy chickens and eggs? He didn't use the term seed capital. He explained it in very simple terms. These chickens would lay eggs, and you could go and sell these eggs, and then you'd have a business. And then over a period of time, you'd be able to buy back this Xbox. And so I remember having controller in hand, headset on, and I heard him say these words. And I was like, oh, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And I agreed to sell the Xbox. So sure enough, we sold the Xbox on eBay. I had to pack it up. It went. And then we took the long journey to the countryside to go to a random farm. And I got to pick my 3 chickens that we would keep and name them. And we got the chickens, we got the chicken coop, and we set it up in our back garden in London in a very residential area. It's very unusual. We fenced off a part of the garden where the chickens would stay. And I would wake up every morning to go and check on my chickens to make sure I'd take their fresh eggs to fill up the food that would be in the container, and like clean up all the poop and everything like that. And I would take the fresh eggs, put it in my mum's Tesco egg containers that she'd already used. And then I would go to school and I would show it to my teachers. And I would say, I have these really organic eggs, and you just won't believe the color of these eggs because they're just like so yellow when I make my omelets in the morning. And like, if you look at the eggs, it hasn't even got the stamp of the expiry date because it's like, these are fresh organic eggs. And I made them. Like these are my chickens, and these are the eggs that, you know, we've made. And we only have like 6 eggs or like whatever, 4 eggs every day. Would you like to buy some eggs? And most of the teachers would just be like, oh my God, he's so cute. He's like, like a little 10-year-old coming to sell his eggs at school. And so I started to build like really good relationships. I had like recurring customers from school who would buy the eggs from me. My neighbors, I'd also sell eggs to my neighbors. Any friends and family that would come over, I'd be like, look, we've got some eggs. I just basically keep moving these eggs. It got to a point where I was saving up all the money that I was able to afford to buy my Xbox again, which was like £150 or something like that. I don't know if I said I sold the eggs for £1 each. So these are really expensive eggs, but people would still buy the eggs.
High margin.
Yeah, it was very high margin. And yeah, that experience just taught me a lot about entrepreneurship in a way I wouldn't be able to describe, because it was such a formative experience at such a young age. That it then started to set in motion a lot of like light bulb moments. And after doing that experience with the eggs, I actually got fed up of selling eggs to my teachers and stuff, and I ended up getting rid of it. And I ended up making whatever, like £100 back. But for my next venture, I was always into tech and iPhones and computers. And at the time, the iPhone 3G had like the long cable, like at the bottom. My dad needed a extension cable to go into his car, into his VW, and every extension cable he had tried wasn't working in that it would charge the device, but it wouldn't let him transmit audio and video through the cable. And so we tried like 10 different cables, and then on the 10th cable, we found it worked, and it would transmit audio and video, and it's just the one that he wanted. And it's finally he could go from the glove box to connect his iPhone. And this is at a time, by the way, where like using a phone in a car was just like not the norm, and having extension cables was also like, why would you need one? So the genuine part for this extension cable on the website was like £80, but we managed to find this one for like £10. And I was curious, what is the difference between that 10th cable and all of the other 9 that came before? And as it turns out, the 9 cables before were 16-pin cables, but the 10th one was a 30-pin cables. There were 30 pins inside the cable, which is what allowed it to transmit audio and video. So I went to AliExpress to import 30-pin cables and get them delivered to my house. And then I sold them on eBay. VW extension cables, or extension cables for VW with like the branded logo. And I sold them for like 30 quid, but I must have got the cables for like 3 quid.
Okay. So it was like a £27 profit for every sale.
Yeah, plus postage and packaging and eBay fees and all that stuff.
So like 75, 80% margin.
It was 75, 80% margin. And every time I'd go to school, my phone ringer was on loud and I'd hear the ka-ching, and I knew exactly what that noise meant. It was like PayPal. Or sometimes I go into class, it'd come out, it was like 3 notifications from PayPal, like you've been paid like £75. But like £75 at that age is like, you're rich. Like
And you're
you've made
13,
so much
right?
money.
How old are you?
Yeah, I was about 13 or 14.
13 or 14 years old.
Yeah,
and
I've
you've already
got some
got a
photos
business,
of me.
e-commerce business.
Yeah.
Incredible. So what was it? How long was this saga, and how many cables did you end up selling?
We ended up selling like hundreds of cables. I realized that VW was part of something called the VW Auto Group. And so you could sell these cables, not just for VWs, but also for Audis and also for Skodas, and they all use the same systems. And so I had multiple adverts on eBay where we were selling all of these cables, and they were just selling like hotcakes. And then one day I noticed that they weren't selling like hotcakes, and the sales started to slow down. I was getting a call from my supplier, like, are you ready for your regular like import of like 100 cables, 200 cables? And I wasn't. And that's when I realized that someone else had made another listing for these extension cables. They must have cottoned on with what was happening. And so I was like, no big deal. And so I just lowered the price slightly. But then sure enough, like a week later, he lowers the price. And then I was like, okay, fine. I guess I need to lower the price. And then we kept going down. And then I had a bright idea. I was like, we can't just keep lowering the price. This isn't good for either of us. So I messaged him privately. I was like, what would it look like if we both just kept our prices at £30? And he was like, sure, let's do it. I was like, yes, problem solved. And so for like the 2 weeks afterwards, we kept the price at £30 and we kept enjoying selling our cables. But because I had way more feedback than him, he realized that I was getting all the sales and he wasn't. And so we ended up having like a price war and it kept going to race to the bottom, and like loads of other people started to get involved. And eventually after a while, it just wasn't that profitable for me. After that point, I started selling USB sticks. It's like 128 gigabyte to 256 gigabyte USB sticks, which at the time was like pretty crazy or unheard of. Like all of my friends at school were interested in getting like Beats headphones. So like, how could I source those? There are all sorts of little gadgets and gizmos which were available in China, which I could import and then I could retail in the UK. And I could be the arbitrator in the middle because it wasn't like such a common thing to do.
How much did you end up making off of this whole venture?
Oh, I made like thousands and thousands of pounds.
Thousands, like 10,000
Oh
pounds?
yeah, we're talking tens of thousands of pounds.
Tens of thousands of pounds at age 13.
I mean, I remember I had £10,000 in savings, like after all my costs and stuff. And that was what was sitting in the bank account after fees and everything. But I had a very pivotal moment in my entrepreneurial journey where I decided that the next frontier for making money with the money was to do day trading. And at the time, foreign exchange trading for retail investors was just opening up. And so I managed to convince my dad to let me open a real account after like testing some demo accounts. And I thought I knew what I was doing with like trading USD against Japanese yen and all that kind of stuff. So I got approved for the account. I funded it with a 10K. And I was like, look, if I could just return like 2K at the end of the week with like 500 to 1 leverage, I'll be in a really good place. And I started trading. And because the leverage was so high, all the swings were like really throwing me off. I didn't really know what I was doing. I lost a bit of money, like a few £100s, like no big deal. I'll try and make it back. I lost another few £100s. I was like, you can see where this is going. And then like within the space of 24 hours on the day that I opened my account, I'd lost all £10,000 just trying to chase the losses. And I was devastated. Like that was like, there was a lot of emotional processing that had to happen at the end of that night because that was years and years and years of saving and hard work. And I didn't sleep very well. I was like sweating throughout the night, and I was like 14 at this time. And it was huge. Like I planned to save up to buy my first car when I was 18 because I've always been interested in cars. And I was like, when I turn 18, I'm gonna get my driving license. I'm gonna buy my first car, and I'll have the freedom of being able to drive around wherever I want, see whoever I want. So that was like a £10,000 mistake. But it honestly taught me so much about like risk management, holding on to money, investing the right way, learning about things. Because after that point, I then started to learn about value investing. And I studied Warren Buffett and his shareholder letters. I made loads of notes and like figuring out what's a margin of safety and how to like identify these companies and going through a balance sheet. And so I felt like I was really ahead of the curve learning about that stuff from an early age. And it really formed my experiences about what it means to invest going forwards. And I still fell for like all of the different scams and things later on, but yeah.
You're perhaps the only person in my personal life I've ever met who was running a business at that age, right? 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. The fact that you mentioned how you read The Intelligent Investor, you're reading Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham at 15, 16, that's incredible. So what do you think that influence of entrepreneurship at an early age did for you long term?
Ooh, good question. Okay, I think ever since that age, I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. So whenever I've been in a situation where I feel like I can add value, I will take the initiative to be able to do that, and I'll just make it happen by myself. And so I can watch a YouTube video to figure something out. I could, I could see business opportunities, and I really want to be able to like see if I can build something there and then. So I didn't end up going straight into business like when I graduated. I ended up taking a very different path, and I went into startups, working in startups, and learning to take extreme ownership, learning to take initiative, learning to put myself out there, learning soft skills, learning how to sell, learning how to market, all of these different things. Those were skills that complemented that entrepreneurial mindset. So eventually when I was ready to start a business, and I knew in my heart of hearts that this is the business I want to like really go all in on, I was so ready to take it because I've had all of these learnings over a long period of time. But there are many. I'll give you one example of like one of the ways which entrepreneurial mindset has helped. When I was 18 and I went to uni, I was given a very generous student loan for going to uni. And in the UK, the student fees are $10,000. And then the student loan you get on top of that for living is like another like $12,000 or $14,000 plus a bursary. And so it's like a lot of money for an 18-year-old. And I certainly didn't need that to live. So I would take the amount of money that I needed to live. And at that time, which is 2017, I took all of that money and I invested it in the stock market. And I invested it in Apple shares, Netflix shares, the S&P 500. I even invested a little bit in Tesla as well. I invested also in like Chipotle. There's like all sorts of like different interesting stocks. And I did that between 2017 and 2020. By the time I graduated in 2020, I already had a portfolio that was enough to pay off my entire student loan. And then in a few years afterwards, like the value of that portfolio ended up going to six figures. But like I wouldn't have done that without the entrepreneurial mindset. And there was nobody in my class who was going into Barclays Bank and asking, can I open up like a, retail investing account? And the lady at the counter was like, you're probably perhaps the youngest person I've seen come in to try and like open up an account. And I was like, I mean, investing's important because I'd learned about it from a young age and learned like how important it is to like be entrepreneurial and just be forward thinking.
Why do you think you were doing those things when others weren't?
I think part of it is like starting point. Like my starting point, my parents, when they came to this country, they had to really make things happen for themselves because they came from Pakistan and India. So my dad was in business and he did make his future and he made enough money. We didn't like keep a lot of it. And so I always knew I was starting off from near zero. It wasn't zero. Like I think everyone has unfair advantages and I feel weird saying that. But I always knew that if I wanted to create the future I wanted to create, entrepreneurship is probably going to be the best vehicle to do that. And so knowing that I needed to save up enough money for deposit my first house, knowing that house prices were rising so quickly, knowing the value of compound interest and starting earlier rather than later, I knew I wanted time in the market rather than timing the market. And so reading around all of these concepts, having a lot of entrepreneurial experiences from a young age, the flywheel, the satisfaction, the challenge of problem solving and helping other people, all reinforce these learnings that eventually led me to do a lot of these different things later.
What do most aspiring entrepreneurs get wrong? A lot of people out there, especially in this day and age, want to run a business. They want to be an entrepreneur. They want fun, freedom, flexibility. Where do they go wrong?
Okay, I would say there are two camps of people who, if they want to start a business and haven't already done it, they've either got a knowledge problem or they've got an execution problem. The knowledge problem is you just don't know how to start a business, what kind of business you want to run. You don't really know what's in alignment with your values. You don't really know what your unfair advantages are. And so for knowledge problems, there are lots of business books out there that you can read that will help you to learn. And there's like ChatGPT, which you can spar with to help you figure out knowledge and learn how to learn. Working for another entrepreneur is another way to fill in the gaps with the knowledge problem and being able to do that for like a couple of years and you get like a PhD in entrepreneurship. The other side of the equation is the execution gap. And for a long time, I was someone who suffered with the execution gap. I had all of the knowledge in the world. I would be able to tell everybody, every business concept under the sun, every like business book that I've read. I've had all these experiences where I've learned different things implicitly, but I wasn't taking action. And I think having being able to move quickly and take action and removing perfectionism has been a personal challenge. But once I've been able to overcome it and look at different strategies that help me to do it, it's led me to start executing, which has basically started the flywheel. And the hardest part is always getting started because everything tends to fall in place afterwards.
Let's hear about your current venture and how you started that and how it's doing. So tell me that story.
Yeah, so in my Ali Abdaal journey, I joined as a video editor for like 3 months. And then for the 6 months afterwards, I was the creative director / head of post-production. And so we were helping to share content across all of Ali's socials and help launch his New York Times bestselling book, Feel Good Productivity. After that wrapped up, I actually wanted to help them out with sales and marketing because I had experience running CRMs and RevOps at a startup before this. And so we used a platform called HubSpot, which I helped them to onboard onto. And then towards the end of my time doing sales and marketing, Ali had some ideas for like other businesses he wanted to start. He was a visionary. And one of them was done for you YouTube channels. And as someone with a background in video production, and I've been obsessed with video editing since I was 13, we haven't really talked about that, but I'd come home from school every day and be obsessed with video and learning After Effects and all of like the programs. I had a really good understanding of both the business side of things, but also the creative side of things. And so I was quite happy to like head up this venture. And so he put me in touch with a guy called Deiss. And so during my time at Ali Abdaal Limited, for like the last 3 months, I was working with Ryan on his YouTube channel and getting it off the ground. The second video that we made together went viral, and I think it's now on like 800K views, and it drove like so much traffic to the channel. It got his channel monetized, and now he's making money through AdSense, which helps like pay for the whole thing. It was the first time where I realized like my contributions and me taking responsibility for an outcome, directly led to some kind of success. And sometimes I think of the Naval quote about like taking accountability. And like when you take on accountability, you take on the accountability of the downside and the upside. And in this case, we had a really high upside. So that really like reinforced like, I think there's some traction here. There is definitely some knowledge and skills that I can share with the world and that I can monetize. And so that eventually led to me thinking, I can do this for Ryan Deiss on the side of a full-time job. Surely I can take on another client, another 2 clients, another 3 clients. And so I started to have a conversation with Ali about like, do we want to take this thing seriously internally? And he had actually changed his mind. He wasn't that excited about an agency because like the margins are a lot smaller. It requires a big team. He's more excited about like software products, AI businesses, because that's just the life cycle of his stage as an entrepreneur. I'm just getting started. So like any business is a really good business, especially one that I'm very passionate about. And so I ended up taking this as a venture of my own. And so when I handed in my notice, I knew I just needed one more client and I'd be able to replace my full-time income with a business income. And it was 3 or 4 weeks after I left the job that I had a meeting set up with a startup, and it was a guy called Nico who works at a company called Claire, and he flew over from New York to London, and he was like, Saf, I've been trying to find someone to help me do this exact thing for the longest time. The fact that I'm coming to London and having this conversation with you shows like how much I need this thing. And he was like, how does it work? How do we get started? What are you offering? And on the spot, I had to like think of all of these different things. I hadn't really thought about it. I was a freelancer up until that point. But I started to solidify things. I started to test different messaging. And there was like 1 or 2 things I said to him, and he literally jumped out of his seat. And I was like, okay, fine. That's what you want. Great. And now I know how I can help you. And so every time we would just sort of like hit on the same point. And then when we started working together, he was like my second client. I was still handling a lot of the work myself. Around that time, I was hiring freelancers to help me with the video editing and the thumbnail design. But a lot of these people had like previously worked for Ali Abdaal, and they might have followed me, or there are people I knew in the industry. There are other agencies I'd built really good relationships with. And so I was in a really good position, like a perfect storm with like my experience, my network, and my skills to be able to help other people have the same outcomes that hopefully Ali Abdaal has. It's a big statement, but yeah.
Do you think agency is a good model for beginners today?
I actually love the agency business model. So when I was starting out, everyone told me agency is the worst business model on the planet. Like it's the fastest way to get gray hair, a receding hairline, and like loads of stress in your life. So I always used to think, man, the agency business model is beneath me. I'm just going to skip it entirely. I'm not going to do it. What I didn't realize is it was perhaps the best business for me to start to learn the skills of entrepreneurship. And it was really well suited to me because I really love interacting with other people. I really love working with other freelancers because I've been already doing it for 2 years at Ali Abdaal. I really love doing the work still, and it was a great way to be able to refine my skill set. So yeah, a lot of people would complain like, there's a ceiling to this thing and like there's all sorts of downsides. But I actually tried out the agency model and I found it fit me really well. And I decided to position myself as a boutique lifestyle business using the oversubscribed model that Daniel Priestley talks about.
Why do you think the agency model works for you when it doesn't work for others?
I've kept my agency deliberately small, which means there isn't a massive team and a massive client roster. I think there are a lot of problems with agencies on this scale and they're trying to get to the next level. That's like one thing. But if I was giving like a more beginner focused tip, the second thing is that business model suits my skill sets and my unfair advantages really well. I already had a really good network. I already knew very good creative talent. I was already getting referrals from other people. And I absolutely just love talking to people and like going on sales calls and going on catch-ups and coffees and all that kind of stuff. Another one of my friends, Sahel, who started Firecut, he's much more suited to building a software business because he loves sitting in front of the computer, figuring a problem out, coding, and vibe coding rather. But that wasn't necessarily my inclination. That wasn't necessarily my calling for my first business. So I think, I really, it wasn't that clear cut at the beginning that the agency business model was what was going to work. But I had to try it to really figure out if it was the right fit.
You're behind some of the biggest YouTube growth stories. So I want to hear from you. What actually works on the platform today? And what's total BS?
Ooh, okay. So the one tip that actually works on the platform today is trying to increase your average view duration. And this is perhaps something that people haven't spoken a lot about before. Your average view duration is the amount of time somebody spends watching your YouTube video. And so you can optimize for the click-through rate and you can really earn the click. But if you can't have that person stick around and stay on the platform for a long time, it doesn't send the right signals to the YouTube algorithm for what they're trying to achieve. And so I would almost say if you optimize for AVD, downstream of that, you're also going to optimize for your click-through rate, for your ideas, for a compelling hook, for the payoffs, like all of these other things. And so how do you keep someone engaged and really interested in the channel for longer? And how do you keep them coming back for more videos? And how do you keep them returning? And so there are all sorts of different things that you can, quick tactical things you can implement in a YouTube video that are like best practices. But ultimately, it is quite hard to come up with a really good idea and a really good payoff and structure it in the right way. And that's really the hard work. Like, how do you do that in the right way?
I've heard mixed reviews when it comes to retention, AVD. On one side, I understand where you're coming from. I think YouTube will push videos that are being viewed longer by most people to other people because they assume that they're being more satisfied, they're more engaged on the platform, they're staying longer on YouTube. But on the other side, there's the whole idea which is like, okay, maybe the best videos aren't the ones that have really engaging edits with music and flashy colors and sound effects going on. So what's your take on that? Do you think AVD is something to actually optimize for in educational channels, or do you think it's overhyped?
Okay, I think they're two different things, and I have a hot take. I think a lot of talking head educational videos look and feel the same now, and everybody copies everyone else's ideas, which is really frustrating, but you just gotta be a lot faster to be able to move. Retention editing is one way that you could potentially increase your AVD. I would argue you might increase it by 20% or something like that. But if you actually took the time to educate the person on the other side, tell a compelling story, have a really big payoff that had to stick around with minimal video editing, you'd probably be able to double that AVD and get an even better result. AVD for me is still like the North Star for the metric that I like to work towards, but retention editing is definitely not the lever that I'm pulling to be able to make it happen. If I am doing any level of retention editing, it's in the hook, which is the first 30 seconds. But even then, I'm trying to deliver on the promise of the title and thumbnail.
What's your framework for writing a more compelling script to increase retention organically rather than relying on the crutch of high intensity editing? What's your framework on like hook and payoff, right? Like how do you actually structure a script or an outline on YouTube to increase AVD?
So each YouTube video is different. When you have a framework, I think you give the impression that there's like a one size fits all, which isn't the case. But something that helps me write scripts is I will always do my scripts sentence by sentence, especially the hooks. I won't do them 2 or 3 sentences at a time. And I will use different levers throughout my hook, such as the credibility of the person speaking, the dream outcome for that YouTube video. I will look at objections that the person might have. I will also have retention pieces, such as like, to understand this dream outcome, you first need to understand something else. So let's start there. And then we go straight into the video, and that's where we start. There are all sorts of different levers that you can implement. And a lot of it is trying different types of hooks, different angles. And you can use ChatGPT to help you come up with these different angles. I wouldn't encourage it to help you write the hook because I still don't think it's quite there. But at least helping you think about the different angles you can use is really helpful. But the trick that I found that's been really helpful for the hooks is you shouldn't be able to remove a sentence from that hook and the whole thing still works. If it does, chances are that line in that hook is probably redundant. And so when I'm building a hook, sometimes I'm like moving stuff that was like at the bottom toward the top, from top to bottom, removing this. Oh, actually remove that. How does that? Okay, let's try it again. And when I'm on a Zoom call with my strategist and we're trying to go through the hooks, like a number of times I will just be reciting the hook as if I was a speaker and just seeing how it sounds and how it works. And does it deliver on the title and thumbnail? Is it something that I would want to watch? Being a consumer of YouTube content definitely helps. It's like a fantastic lens to be able to look through how to produce it in the first place. And so that there is as much of a science as there is an art to being able to write the hooks.
What do you think separates the channels that last from the ones that don't?
Ali Abdaal is one example of a creator who has stood the test of time up until this point, 2025. He has reinvented himself a number of times. He started with medical content, and then he went into investing content, then entrepreneurship. Now it's like passive income, and he's even dabbling a little bit with like relationships. There's all sorts of different topics that he's touching upon. In my opinion, the YouTube channel, which outlasts the others, is the one that continues to innovate over time, but also really understands the audience that has grown with them. I am, and you are also an example of the audience that has grown with Ali. The videos that you would have engaged with at the start of Ali's journey will be very different to the ones that you engage with now. And it's very hard to reinvent yourself when you have a channel that's like 4 million subscribers. And it's really hard to motivate yourself to continue to make YouTube videos if you're burnt out. But also, you could put out a mediocre video, it will still get loads of views. And so it's really hard to tell like what's innovating, what's not. And often there's like a dip before it picks up again. So yeah, I think being able to really understand your audience and looking at your channel analytics is a great way to start. But also looking at other YouTube channels in your niche that are growing really quickly. What are they doing differently? So in Ali Abdaal's case, we look at Nisha. She's like absolutely exploding at the moment. She's doing really well. Dan Martell, he's doing a really good job. Alex Hormozi. And they've got like a very interesting and similar style, right? And so you look at that and it's like, okay, that's working. It's not necessarily something we'd copy on Ali's channel, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Also, Mark Tilbury, he's also making YouTube videos that like absolutely popping off. So there are creators which I wouldn't necessarily have heard of 4 years ago as being YouTube native creators, but they are starting to become a lot more prominent and significant now, and there's going to be reasons behind their success. So being able to decode like the outlier videos, their hooks, their payoffs, their audiences, and then being able to use those insights to feed it back into your channel is a great way to innovate and stay ahead of the curve.
Do you think you need to keep reinventing yourself to stay relevant on the platform? And if so, how does one do that?
From observation, like a lot of YouTube creators like follow an arc. They peak and then at some point they trough and they like die away. If you want to avoid that trajectory, I think you have to keep innovating on a platform, especially in 2025 when things are moving way more quickly than ever before. Preferences, taste, AI tools are helping people to create all sorts of different things. I think it's really important to keep innovating on a platform. I also think it's really important to build an authentic relationship with your audience, because in a world of AI, I can totally see how the connection to someone and a trusted source is going to be way more important than getting your information just from another AI chatbot. Yeah, to answer your question, yes.
Another example of this done well in Hollywood and music is Will Smith. Mm-hmm. I read his book, Will, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And a huge part of that book is his whole concept of how he started in rap and music, and then he went to TV, and then he went to movies, right? So in order to stay relevant in media, you almost have to go one after another, after another, after another. And it seems like, based on observation from both of us, that the creators who don't actually change and innovate end up being the ones who fall off. And there's so many creators who are massive 5, 6, 7 years ago. And you look at them now and you look at them since, and they've completely fallen off. Longevity as a creator, I think, is something that'll becoming even more important with big names out there.
100%. And I mean, like, I specifically work with entrepreneurs on their YouTube channels. And I think as it relates to longevity, you can get like loads of views, but like in that time, if you're not monetizing those views, it doesn't necessarily help you create the business outcomes that you want. So, you know, Ryan Deiss is an example of someone who's reinvented himself. He has been on so many stages in the past. He's written books, he's grown businesses. He is like, if you're in the entrepreneur scene, chances are you'll know Ryan Deiss, and he's like a big thing. But he's recently scrapped his company, digitalmarketer.com, which is like a 7-figure company. And now he's going all in on YouTube, and he's bringing all of that education and taking it online for free. He's a great example of someone that's innovating and reinventing himself. Sure, he's not a typical YouTuber, because you wouldn't think of him that way, but he has had to reinvent himself time and time and time again, just like the example with Will. Even with Daniel Priestley, he's doing the same thing. He's been in the entrepreneur scene for a really long time. But suddenly, 2 years ago, we all start seeing him on Diary of a CEO. It's like, oh, wow, he's a podcast guest. He's the money guy. And then slowly but surely, you start to associate him with a different type of media. He's showing up in a different way. He's meeting the audience in the format where they're going to interact with him the best.
Do you think to be a successful creator, one needs to do something offline and then bring it online? Or can someone be building their presence online as they're growing? So to clarify the question, both the examples you gave, Daniel Priestley, Ryan Deiss, did something for decades in the world of business, not online. And now they brought that to the world of content and social media, and they're blowing up because of it. So would you recommend someone spends 5-10 years offline building an authority in some other niche and then makes their big launch? Or do you think it can be done simultaneously?
I think if both those two people were starting YouTube channels together today, they would be going online first and they'd be shipping regularly and looking at the feedback. And that would definitely be my recommendation. Yes, their context is they had offline businesses before they went into doing YouTube, but they're very specific entrepreneurs. I think for most people starting out, the best way is to get the feedback loop of like posting a video once per week and slowly leveling up over time and making 1% improvements to your title, your thumbnail, your hook, your format, finding the way that you can show up in the world. And then over time, it's really easy to overthink a strategy from like day one, but chances are your strategy is going to be completely different in 60 days time once you see what's working. Once you have creator audience fit, then you can start to craft a better strategy around, okay, these are the content pillars that my audience wants to hear from me. How can I make more videos on those topics?
If someone is in their 20s and all they want is to achieve financial freedom, make a 6-figure business doing what they love, what is the playbook over the next 3 to 6 months? What are those step-by-step principles you feel like they should do, whether it's education, whether it's action? What should they do to pull off that outcome?
Okay, I can only talk from my own experience, as always, and I can't speak in absolutes. But if I've got a younger brother who's 18 and he's very interested in entrepreneurship, and if I was advising my younger brother, I would say, forget about investing in the S&P 500, invest in the SME 500. Like, what are some skills that you can acquire now that's going to help you to level up and be in the right position in 2 years? I definitely think learning to code and learning to create content are two of the biggest levers that you can be pulling. I think also being AI native, which is probably something that happens by default for young people, but being very conscious about it and being, I think being AI native is also going to be increasingly important as well. I think understanding that your full-time job won't necessarily make you financially independent is a good awareness step to have. That's like the blue pill, red pill in the matrix. And then once you realize that, it's like, oh, okay, fine. So it means I need to start a business, have equity in a company to be able to grow a business and be able to earn my freedom. So I think entrepreneurship is probably one of the best ways to achieve financial freedom for the right person. I feel like everyone can adopt an entrepreneurial mindset. The landscape of work is going to completely change. And for most of my friends who aren't entrepreneurs, I can totally see them being fractional in the services that they offer to other people on the side. And that's a really easy way to get your feet off the ground and achieve some level of financial freedom.
Saf, thanks for doing this. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Of course. That's today's episode of Liftoff. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you want early access to every single one of these episodes, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other podcast app of choice and follow Liftoff with Aman Manazir. That's right, you can listen to every episode early on the podcast apps before they get released on YouTube. So make sure to go over and follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, turn on notifications, or check the links in the description. And finally, always remember, the night is darkest before the dawn. I'll see you in the next one.